I'm going to turn things over to Gustavo Torres, the director of the Youth Advocacy Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids, who will be serving as the moderator for today's panel of youth ambassadors. So Gustavo, feel free to take the reins.
Thank you so much, Ashley, and hello, everyone. For those who I have not had an opportunity to meet yet, my name is Gustavo Torres. I am the Director of Youth Advocacy at the Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids. I am joined by three amazing young advocates who have truly created monumental change in their communities and are continuing on the front lines of addressing the e-cigarette epidemic and the impacts that tobacco has, not only within their local communities, but supporting and engaging across the globe. So what I'd first like to do is just welcome each of the young people we have, Anna Grace, Milton, and Yashi. So I'm first going to turn it over to all of them to just introduce themselves. So their name, where they're from, how they got involved in tobacco control advocacy, just to allow us to anchor a little bit in today's amazing panelists. So with that, I will turn it over first to Anna Grace.
Hello, I'm Anna Grace. I she, her pronouns. I'm originally from Minnesota, but I go to school in New Mexico. I got involved in tobacco prevention work 5 years ago. And I got involved because I have a parent who has an addiction, and while it's not to tobacco, I had wanted to get engaged in some way of some sort of substance to help other people and not make it something that is accessible. And then as I did more work, I learned about how it was marketed disproportionately to young people and people of color and lower income people. And that's how I got really interested. And now I do that as a job, which is really fun.
And now I'll turn it over to Milton.
Hi, everyone. I'm Milton. First off, I just want to say I'm really thankful to have the opportunity to be part of this panel today. So I'm a high school senior from Sacramento, California, and quite similar to Anna Grace's story, I got involved in tobacco control because of my grandfather's use of cigarettes and his addiction to cigarettes for a very large part of his life. So seeing my grandfather use cigarettes for decades and decades really inspired me. And when I entered high school and middle school, seeing my peers around me getting addicted to e-cigarettes in a similar manner to how my grandfather got addicted to cigarettes was something that really pushed me towards tobacco control advocacy.
Awesome. Yashi.
Hi, everyone. My name is Yoshi. I'm a freshman at Rutgers University in New Jersey. I started tobacco prevention work in the sophomore year of my high school. And I got involved because I started to see how much vaping was becoming a problem at my high school. I was one of those kids who always felt like, no, that doesn't happen in my high school. It happened in other places. But I started to realize that many of my peers were vaping and smoking. So I wanted to get involved and make sure that this community is a safe place for everyone. And I have little siblings, so I thought of them in my tobacco prevention work as well. So yeah, and I'm also really glad to talk to you all today.
Awesome. So it is, again, so great to be able to have each of you on today's panel. And again, thank you to the folks for inviting us to be here today. So when we talk a little bit about the importance of engaging youth in education and policy initiatives, it's so important that we really do understand the critical role that young people play within their communities as it relates to educating their peers and supporting policy change initiatives, which each of these young people have done. And when we think about youth engagement, a lot of times we hear that it's very difficult, and there's a lot of challenges from some folks. And while engaging young people is a heavy responsibility, because you are supporting the current generation of young people leading into this movement, you're also supporting them in their future development and providing opportunities for future career pathways. And so we understand that youth engagement does bring a true sense of energy to the movement, but also the young people are the ones most impacted, right? They are the ones that the tobacco industry understands that they need to addict at a young age to have consumers for life. And as we've looked at the continued trends of industry marketing and the current e-cigarette epidemic, where we saw lifestyle marketing and branding, et cetera, that led to a huge rise in youth use of these products. We know that a whole new generation of young people are welcomed to a potential lifetime of nicotine addiction, similar to what's been done in the past, and something that we're continuing to fight for. So really, as we're talking through today's panel, we have a variety of questions that we'll ask of the young people on today's panel. We would like to have some interaction. So if somebody has a question, we will open up for some questions at the end of today's panel as well. But what we'll start to learn is that, you know, young people have really been pivotal in engaging on local, statewide, and national kind of efforts, really advancing successful policy engagement practices, and really showcasing firsthand why we are in good hands with this current generation of young people helping to lead the way in this critical work that we're all doing. So as we start to jump in, a lot of the questions that we're talking about is really rooted in authentic youth engagement. Understanding that when we engage young people authentically, and when we provide a space for young people to have an equal voice in this movement, that is, you know, the highest form of engagement, right? Where young people are leading and adults are actually really supporting these movements. A lot of times we see that spaces are either not accessible to young people, or if it is accessible to them, there's traditionally, in a lot of instances, not a seat at that table then for them. And I always say, as a coordinator, adult coordinator, ally, supporter of young people, it's my job to ensure that they are able to know when these meetings are, and help provide opportunities for them to not only show up, but to be able to show out and, you know, stand on that table if there's a chair not available for a young person. Because again, young people are the current leaders of our society, that are, and we are framing policies and initiatives that will impact their life a lot longer than it will ours in some instances, right? So it's so critical when we talk about engaging young people in this issue, that we think about strategies that authentically engage them, provide that support system to ensure that they can be seen and they can be heard. So in talking a little bit, I'm going to open up this first question for all of our panelists. So you could decide who wants to go first, but why is it important for youth to advocate for policy change?
I think I could take a quick stab at that first question. So I think really it's really fundamental for individuals, and especially youth, to be engaged with policy change, really because policy change impacts youth, as you mentioned. And it's such a fundamental part. And I think with an issue like tobacco control advocacy, as you mentioned a tiny bit, the tobacco industry really targets youth. So I think youth being involved in policy change really gives them that opportunity to provide that specific youth perspective that a legislator can't provide, or that certain data points can't provide. So I think it's really important for youth to have a voice and to be able to shape policies that will ultimately end up impacting them.
For sure. And going off of Milton, it's like, when talking about tobacco specifically, young people are kind of at the front and center, and any policy that impacts a person, they should be engaged in. So like if you're talking about like soil health, you should be engaging farmers. Like you're not going to leave out those key populations. which tend to be left out. So you need to figure out how to engage them, which is why youth are so important. And they're also really important because they have a very unique perspective. And while we're young and like we're not, we aren't trained lobbyists like some of the lobbyists at the Capitol maybe, we have our own area of expertise of being young and having the things that we see out in our own world. And sharing that is a very unique perspective, which needs to be seen. And that's why I think that youth and policy change are very important.
Also to add exactly what Erin said in the chat, that youth listen more to their peers. When I got involved in like my statewide campaigns, the biggest thing for like what adults told me is that we want you guys to be involved because your peers are going to listen to you more rather than adults. Like it's so much more effective when teens are giving presentations, or like we're here, we're panelists. Like it's easier for the audience of youth to relate to teens when they're giving presentations and such, especially in advocacy, as opposed to an adult. Like if you think about like the staple message out there, like say, don't drink and drive, right? If an adult told you, it'd be like, yeah, of course, we hear that every year in school. But like if a teen got up and did a whole presentation and was super engaged with the audience, that makes such a big difference in advocacy. So I think exactly the big part of like why youth are important for policy change is because our peers listen to us more, but we also have another engaging factor with the current generation.
That's great. And when we think about, kind of understanding that peer-to-peer approach is so important and impactful, right? But also it provides that further kind of credibility, right, amongst your peers when there is some of that direct engagement. So what does some effective and or impactful youth engagement strategies look like? So how have you, engaged and recruited with your peers? And what are some tips that you could provide the folks on this call in engaging young people? Milton, do you want to jump in there first?
Yeah, I could. Yeah, so I think one of the greatest tools that I've seen that has been used to really engage youth in advocacy and tobacco control as a whole really has been social media. And I think similarly to how youth are really inclined towards technology, I think social media really helps to connect youth and kind of bridge the gap between the tobacco control community and youth communities. And I think too, with a lot of different tobacco control organizations, it really benefits them to have youth input into their own social media posts, because I've seen a lot of different tobacco control organizations kind of using different popular trends among youth with social media posts, like on TikTok or on Instagram, just to be able to kind of present tobacco control in a more like palatable manner and in a manner that really engages youth and kind of activates them in the fight against the tobacco industry.
So Milton, with that, I know that you did some engagement with ASH around their social media engagement and content. Can you just share a little bit more? What were some strategies that they use kind of in engaging with you, and maybe some replicable strategies that others could start to consider when thinking about engaging young people, meeting them where they are through social media?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think ASH, so Action on Smoking and Health, does a great job with their TikTok page. They're really active on TikTok, which is a really popular social media platform for youth. And essentially what they do is with a lot of the mainstream TikTok trends that youth are a part of just in their regular social lives, they kind of add a different tobacco control spin on it. So they're able to educate youth on tobacco control while also contributing to those same social media TikTok trends. And I think that really kind of provides a really great entry point for youth who might kind of be displeased towards maybe like an adult essentially presenting information and statistics on tobacco control, but instead putting it in a more kind of engaging manner through those TikTok trends for them to enter into tobacco control.
That's great. Anna, Yashi, do you want to share any other notes around the social engagement? I know in New Jersey, you know, your group has done, Josh's group in New Jersey has done so much work that has really elevated their peers' voice on social. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yes, of course. So I was part of a statewide campaign called Incorruptible Us, which is a youth tobacco action group that's statewide in New Jersey. And basically our main focus was education. So what we did is we gave presentations to different high schools, adults, peers, youth, like we tried to hit a lot of different demographics and make sure everyone knew exactly what a vape is, what an e-cigarette is, what's the e-cigarette epidemic, and all of that stuff. Because turns out a lot of teachers do not know themselves what a e-cigarette looks like, and a lot of youth didn't know either. A big part is that a lot of people didn't know this was a problem at all. So Incorruptible Us really elevated this whole movement through education, and like a lot of counties had representatives, and in each high school, everyone would do something a little bit different. So like in my high school, we went to our local blood drives and we told everyone in the community what the problem is exactly. We gave presentations through other clubs. We presented in various areas. So I think the focus on social media definitely helped. Our emphasis was more on like in-person education. We also played a lot of video games to see what people learned about the problem and what they would like to know more about. So just that we educated different people in our community to make sure everyone knew this was a problem and how they can take action.
That's great. Anna Grace, you know, another kind of component of youth engagement, especially when we talk about tobacco, is really exposing the tobacco industry tactics. Could you discuss a little bit about what you've done in that space and why it is so important, again, to engage young people in this issue?
For sure. So I, all of my high school years interned at the Minnesota like smoke-free organization. And we did a lot of research around this actually. And we went into schools and sat with like just core groups of young people. And we discussed with them, we're like, what do you know about tobacco? What don't you know? And from there, we were able to kind of expose the things that big tobacco does and kind of present the facts, present the research, present the marketing tactics on young people of color, of lower income communities, and allow the young people to discuss it amongst themselves and discuss it with us there, so we can kind of make it like giving their perspective as well, because everyone knows something in a very different way, and able to share that was very important. And so that's kind of a way that we have exposed the industry, as well as through like school presentations and just general discussions. And then I'm also going to add on another really important thing about engaging young people is kind of meeting them where they're at, as Gustavo mentioned earlier, is like figuring out what works for them and what they know, what they want to get engaged in, and meeting young people's schedules where they're at. Like I've had a lot of organizations who are like, hey, let's do this right now. And I'm like, I go to school full time. I don't have the ability to do this. Or a lot of the adult peers that I work with get paid for what they're doing. Sometimes I don't get paid for what I'm doing. And you're like, if you're going to meet a person where they're at, expect them to produce the same kind of work you're doing, or you want them to be at your level, you need to give them back what you're getting as well. So like compensate them for their time and meet their needs where they're at and meet their timing where they're at, because not everybody has the ability to be engaged as a 9-to-5 schedule as well. So I thought that'd be important to add in.
That's great. And I think, again, kind of going back to incentives and how do you incentivize youth engagement, whether it's through stipends, to speak at specific events. What are some ways that you all have felt you've seen and you've been incentivized for your engagement that really resonated and are replicable for other maybe groups or organizations looking to engage young people? Kind of open this up to all three of you.
So I think a big part of engagement is like as a leader and an advocate, I think talking about vulnerabilities and also like shortcomings and weaknesses and where we're still trying to improve. Like I know when we gave presentations at my high school, it was so easy for people to just turn off their ears or like stop listening when you said vaping or smoking because they thought like we're gonna get the same message we get every year: don't smoke, don't vape. But we told them about alternatives. Like we mentioned a lot of things about natural highs, which is like ways you can get that feeling of being on the top of the world without using substances, engaging in your hobbies and passions. So I think a form of engagement is just like bringing that energy into the room and just trying to stray away from the normal like don't do drugs kind of thing, like bringing a little bit more passion and genuine interest in it, because that allows other people to resonate with it too. And like what Anna Grace said, where you have to meet other people, like I gave presentations to some middle schoolers a few months ago, and I knew they were not the same demographic as adults or high schoolers. So we raffled off prizes for people who got like the top 5 in like a Kahoot game or something like that. And all the questions were about smoking and vaping from a presentation we had given before. So we knew they knew in order to get a prize, they had to listen to the presentation, they had to get the questions right, they had to be engaged. So like little things, like especially incentives is a really great thing, part of engagement, especially for people who go to school, like free food and games and prizes, amazing, everyone will listen. But then at the end of the day, you just got to remind them like why you're really there and that you have a passion for it and stuff like that. So I think that usually works in terms of engagement.
For sure. And jumping off of what Yashi said about incentives like in school. So like when I would give presentations, we'd be like, if someone answered a question, you give them like even like a pen or like a post-it note or something, like something that engages everyone so they're not just kind of in their own world. And while there are like monetary incentives, there's also ways of like so in Minnesota, we do like, week of action, like people go to the Capitol and lobby. And last year's all virtual. And so we're like, how do we engage more young people and get them to want to go? And so we went to like a local bakery and had we had cookies sent to each person's house, and then we had like little swag bags sent to people's houses so they got interested. And like over the holidays we do like cookie decorating and things like that, where it's like also having fun on the side of doing tobacco work and also having fun on the side of education, because like, well, education is fun, there's only so much of it you can do, and really getting the young people interested in doing other fun things. And to answer your question, Jane, I get incentives a lot for like, I think we're all getting incentivized for speaking right now because this is our, time and space where we could be doing other things. And so I have, and I probably think that Yashi and Milton have as well.
Yeah, so again, kind of, I think you touched on, or we've kind of touched on two things, right? So incentives, but also creating and fostering an environment, through fun, and the virtual cookie decorating kind of seemed like, again, another great way kind of incentivize some engagement, really keep it light, and do something kind of a little bit out of the norm. So thinking a little bit about when we talk about youth legitimacy and advocacy and tobacco control, really, what does that look like, right? We know that young people provide energy and vitality to this issue. For most of us, especially folks that are doing grant-based work, you have a lot of deliverables, you're checking boxes. And it was mentioned earlier in the presentation, really engaging young people in that process. I think Yashi mentioned a little bit in the development of those processes are so key when you're talking about helping to provide true skills for young people to develop in this space. But also it helps to build further legitimacy in talking about the work. So would Milton, first I'll turn it over to you, to ask you, what does youth legitimacy look like? And then, how could tobacco control programs channel some of the energy of young people in this work?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think youth are able to provide a lot of really great ideas, and especially in tobacco control work, a lot of great project ideas and great visions on how to advance tobacco control advocacy on a legislative standpoint, but also on like a peer education standpoint. So I think really what I've seen work best in my own tobacco control work is that tobacco control organizations help to provide support and help to provide guidance to youth. So I know, at least within my experiences, some of the local work that I've done has revolved around peer PSA contests where local high school students can submit PSAs and there's a whole event gathered around that, or different statewide gatherings where individuals can come together and learn about tobacco control and then go advocate and educate their state legislators. So I think that youth are really able to provide a lot of these great ideas, and that tobacco control organizations can really provide the support and guidance to really bring those ideas to fruition in order to further tobacco control advocacy.
Great. Anna Grace and Yashi, anything else you'd like to add to that point?
Another thing that we bring to the table, I feel like, is this diverse representation and also generational insight. So like take CTF for example, you have a lot of adults working, but you also have a lot of youth working through the National Youth Ambassadors Program, which we're all a part of. The campaign in my home state is very youth-led. And so we have a lot of youth working alongside adults, and it feels so great to know that you are able to have impact on your community. Also with diverse representation, like we make sure that everyone gets involved if they want to be involved. And I know a big part of tobacco's targeting tactics is targeting different demographics. So within the youth, also targeting LGBTQ plus communities. And there's also a lot of environmental issues with that. So like big tobacco targets so many different like demographics in so many different areas. So in all of our campaigns, we make sure that whoever wants to be involved, whoever has an interest in anything can be involved and has the space to make an impact, which I think is a really great thing.
For sure. I agree with Yashi. And I think jumping off of the like intergenerational work and the marketing like tactics kind of go hand in hand sometimes. So like in my work, I'm always the youngest person at the table, but like, you have the young person who's being targeted, and then you have an older person who has been targeted, and then an older person who's been targeted. And all of us have been targeted by the market at some point. And because everyone there tends to be from different communities, and so you're able to kind of relate on the ways that big tobacco has gone after people, and kind of come in as a collective and use everyone's power and go up against them, which is super, super powerful.
As we are kind of just diving a little bit into some of that interest and intent, how can tobacco control efforts really connect the intersectionality of tobacco and kind of other issues that young people care about in a way that helps to prioritize, youth activism? And then kind of a follow-up with that is, how important is it to really highlight the intersectionality of tobacco and other issues young people care about? This is open for all the panelists.
I can kick it off, I guess. I guess how like this has been pertained like in my life. So I do also climate justice work. And a big thing that, ties in a lot of young people right now is environmental concerns. And so if you're trying to get someone involved in tobacco prevention work, and honestly, if we're being quite frank here, tobacco prevention work is kind of a joke to a lot of young people. Because campaigns in the past and marketing in the past has just not worked for young people. And also they're like, it's just, why would I care about something that we all do? It's like, you don't want to touch a lot of these movements. And I've been made fun of it for in my life. And so you're like, how do we engage young people and get them to realize it's an issue? So like I worked with some climate organizations, and you're like, okay, so tobacco does XYZ to the environment. So then people are like, oh, tobacco is an issue. And then we can kind of get back from our desensitization. Like we're all so desensitized as young people to tobacco, and we can kind of get out of that little loop and be like, okay, this is also an issue that it impacts, and here's how we can care. Or you can go to like your local GSA group at a high school and be like, this is what big tobacco is doing to your communities. Now, how can we care about this? And then young people will start to care. So kind of tying in going after a certain issue and then tying in tobacco as the secondhand issue can sometimes work to make it the firsthand issue. It's kind of like reversing it is how I've seen it done in my own work.
Another thing is, I believe CTFK, when we've posted a lot of social media that say that tobacco is a social justice issue, and I think that is so true because so many minorities are targeted by big tobacco. As Anna Grace said, that the environmental impacts of vaping and smoking are huge. There's also a big part that we focus on in my hometown is mental health, how much tobacco use impacts mental health and physical health also. So I think if you know that someone is interested in something else, exactly what Anna Grace said, you just connect that back to the tobacco issue. The tobacco issue has so many intersections. Like I'm sure everyone can find a connection between something that they stand up for and tobacco. So I definitely agree. Like we focused a lot on the mental health aspect of it, and that got a lot of people involved from mental health clubs in our school. So yeah.
Yeah, I think just to echo the points that have been made too, I think tobacco use and tobacco as an issue really is just a manifestation of so many of the other issues we see, whether it be racial inequity or environmental issues. And I know that youth and Generation Z are very passionate about some of these issues, like racial inequity or environmental issues. And I think it's a really great entry point to really help educate them on how tobacco use really perpetuates those injustices, and how fighting tobacco can be seen as a step towards fighting for racial equity or fighting for the environment.
And as I say, as a practitioner of, authentic youth engagement strategies, I lead with youth engagement and development first. The topic is tobacco. So the lens, young people are always going to get the issue. But if we kind of focus again on building the capacity and supporting young people's personal development, and that strengthens the engagement kind of overall in a mutually beneficial way. Another thing that we started to just kind of touch on a little bit is, diverse representation, generational insight. So let's talk a little bit about how can tobacco control programs and kind of general advocacy organizations really ensure that disenfranchised and particularly underserved communities, which are most impacted by tobacco, are really engaged in this issue.
I think just putting it out there, like even on social media, because that's how I found out. Like that I found out during the pandemic that Big Tobacco was also selling masks, which is so ironic. So like a big part is social media, because like the way that you format some of these assets online, you can like really get people's attention and tell them what what is happening with the tobacco issue. A lot of times educative like presentations and events like these a lot. I've been to a lot of virtual events about tobacco prevention. I've gained so much knowledge from them. So just attending these events, organizations can also hold a lot of free events, and like when things go in person more, a lot of in-person events at like local fairs or local community events. In my hometown, we have a national night out that a bunch of organizations kind of head. So we made sure that Incorruptible Laws was represented there so that they know how youth are being involved and how community members can get involved as well.
And I think in my work of addressing Gustavo's question, is the way to address a lot of and get into a lot of these communities is by literally getting into these communities. So working with like community leaders, like we work with a lot of like pastors who can get to their churches and have these discussions. Or working with people even from like the city council, not making it a like political thing, but making it like, this is something that we care about and how can we address this? And then also just meeting people where they're at, kind of like how we strictly, like when we want to engage young people, we want to meet them where we're at. But like there's so many other demographics that are targeted by big tobacco. So like also meeting them where they're at and listening to them and hearing their stories, and then finding a way to either engage them or share their stories and kind of be like, this is an issue and this is how people see it in their communities.
Yeah, and to Anna Grace's point, I think it's really important in tobacco control work and advocacy as a whole to really prioritize it and make it focus on connections. And I think really a lot of grassroots activism and a lot of grassroots community work that I've done has really revolved around connections and really just having conversations with individuals in the community, and really being able to listen and being able to put forth an effort to actively listen to their own experiences. Because I think a very large number of people have been impacted by tobacco, whether it's a family member or a friend or a peer who's used tobacco and who's faced those repercussions that are inflicted by the tobacco industry. But I think it's really important just to really put forth an active effort to listen to these very diverse experiences that we see in our communities.
Yeah, so, the kind of common theme that I hear each of you saying is really kind of listening. And I think this is really kind of a, not just to community, right? Specifically that we are working and engaging with, but listening to people, the ideas and perspectives that they bring, knowing that young people do bring a lot of creativity and innovation to this effort. So with that, I do want to kind of ask a question again for all of you. What creative or innovative ways have you deployed in the past to support your advocacy or community engagement work?
Yeah, I think in my experiences, one of the most creative ways I've seen tobacco control advocacy and awareness brought to the issue was really through connecting it to things you may not seem, or that may not seem like conventionally related to public health or to tobacco control. So I know in my experiences, I've been a part of a research study called the Thumbs Up, Thumbs Down Tobacco Research Program. And it was actually one of my first entries into tobacco control work. And essentially what this study does is it analyzes top 10 grossing box office films in the United States and looks at tobacco incidents and the presence of tobacco in those movies. And I think it's a really great entry point, and it's a really creative way towards looking at tobacco use and tobacco as an issue, because of course we know the presence of tobacco and the constant visuals of tobacco that youth see have a really large impact on whether or not they decide to use tobacco. And I think really having youth involved in a research study where they can go out and watch movies and analyze it for tobacco is just a really unique way to engage youth who are already interested in movies, but also to kind of shine a new light on how they view this issue.
That's great. I connect with like that creative way to connect it to something that doesn't really seem like it would connect at first. In my senior year, I gave a speech in my public speaking class about big tobacco's targeting tactics. And I was trying to figure out a way how to relate it to our hometown. How can I actually tell people that they're being targeted without like just saying like, oh yeah, you're being targeted without no support. So I figured out that there was a study done that showed like a lot of the top music that like on the top pop charts, a lot of the music videos include e-cigarettes. So I took like three very popular songs and I put like visuals up in a presentation to support my speech, and I kind of told everyone like, you've probably heard of these songs. Well, these songs have product placement for e-cigarettes. I also told them locations of vape shops that are really close to places where kids hang out, so like maybe restaurants, fast food places, party venues. So I tried to connect it back to our hometown and show everyone that like they're really close to the issue, no matter how far they think away, how far they think they are. Because clearly we don't see like outward advertisements for them, for big tobacco products, but they're very subtle advertisements. If you look around in your hometown, I'm pretty sure you can find them. So I think that was a creative way just to connect it back to places you see every day, and just thinking about how this big corporation is subtly just trying to sell you these products.
For sure, for sure. And I think we have become, as young people, so like desensitized to the whole tobacco issue as like a whole. We're like, whatever. But kind of like on like Yashi and Milton said, like kind of time, like taking it away from tobacco and finding another thing. But something useful that I found is like really going in and meeting with young people and being like, okay, do you know anyone who has died of like a smoking related illness or something? And then people are like, oh, wait. And then tying it down, discussing like, where do you see tobacco in your life, in the world, and kind of debunk all of that step by step. I think really get young people engaged, really interested in it, and just kind of listening to how they feel and see it. But yeah, the other day, like tweeted something. I was like, yeah, like we all know somebody who's smoked. We all know somebody who's been impacted. And everyone was like, oh, my uncle died of cancer. Oh, blah, blah, blah. And you're like, oh, that is a very fascinating thing that we don't think about it. Even like in my own life, I was at a climbing thing with my friends, and they all smoke and vape and do everything. And they were all cognitively not there. And I gave them my like tobacco presentation, and they were like, whoa, Anna Grace, this is like the most fascinating thing we've ever seen. Like, we didn't know that these are things that impacted us. And so like even people who use products realize that it's an issue, but they don't see how they're being marketed until you kind of put it in front of their face sometimes, which is not always the best approach, but sometimes it is the necessary approach.
So I know there's been a couple kind of notes in the chat, really talking about, having proactive programs to really address why students are really using these products, right? And identifying strategies to support cessation services for young people that's tailored, that resonates with them. One example is Truce Text to Quit program. So I do think, kind of reiterating the why young people are using these products is so important, and looking at equipping young people with refusal skills is so important. And it goes back to that skill that you're providing young people to refuse these types of advances from substances with confidence, right? Not to kind of fall into that path. So when we think about, how critical youth engagement is, we really do know that firsthand, young people and tobacco's disproportionate impact on themselves and their communities really speak to the legitimate claims and stakes that youth have in this issue. So really connecting that peer-to-peer approach, really understanding how it's impacting them, understanding the rationale and why young people are using these products, and providing a judgment-free kind of forum to be able to express some of that is definitely critical. So when we talk about youth engagement, and again, I'm going to open to all the panelists, how do young people benefit from, authentic youth engagement or youth engagement in general? And more specifically, how have you all personally benefited from your engagement in tobacco control work and programs?
I think a big thing for me is there's like when you're advocating, especially in your hometown, you have a small group of people. It's really hard to know if other people think the same way you do, if other people are passionate the way you are. So especially through CTFK and all the virtual events and stuff we've had, I've gotten to engage with youth that are as passionate as I am for this cause. And that's just such like that unifying feeling that like there are so many people that are willing to stand up against big tobacco. And I feel like that's not only cinematic, but also very motivating. And personally, I've made a lot of friends through tobacco work. In high school, I went to a leadership camp and I made so many friends, and we all are ambassadors now, so which is amazing. So like we're all part of these different organizations, and whenever we hear something in the news or something, or like a step forward in tobacco advocacy, we all like text each other and we're like, oh my gosh, look what's on the news, something good happened, or look, we need to work on something. It's just a unifying feeling. So I think it's not only to something put on your resume, but it's also something that you can carry through your life, and you just make so many friends as part of it. So that's been a really big thing for me, just like making friends and finding this group of people.
Yeah, I think authentic youth engagement really creates a sense of community within youth, and a really strong sense of community. And I think Yashi was really alluding to that. And I think likewise to her experiences, tobacco control advocacy really has created a sense of community in my life. And I've met so many different individuals and so many passionate and intelligent and smart young youth who are really passionate about fighting for tobacco control advocacy. And I think through that sense of community, you really start to change the social norms around tobacco, and not only rejecting tobacco use, but advocating for public health and advocating for a future where youth don't have to be targeted by tobacco, and for a future where youth can have optimal chances for health and things like that.
For sure. Jumping off of the like community aspect, is you definitely build a sense of community. And like in my work, I've done a lot of coalition building. So you like network with a lot of people and are able to carry that forward in other aspects of life, and even have like, a lot of my mentors are older people who are, have their MPHs and are like getting somewhere in life, and you're able to have a relationship with somebody who is seemingly above you, but like also kind of at your level. Which is super, super nice. And also just gaining the skills and professional skills to bring into life has also been nice. As well as like, I don't know, at least in my experience, is that other people can come to you with questions and come to you with trust. If there's something going on in their life, they can come to you and share and ask for resources, which has given me a lot of confidence as well, to be like, okay, people trust you and the work that you're doing. And like a lot of them have been users asking for help, which is a really good thing that every community needs.
That's great. So when we think about, we definitely understand, how young people could benefit from engagement. What are some ways adults benefit by engaging young people?
I think one big way is that adults are able to see that there's this next generation of people that are willing to come in and take their spot, like in the future, in the very, very, very in the future. But like, I think it gives adults a motivation to keep going as well, right? I think it's this relationship when especially for me when I was very unmotivated, and I felt like there was something more I could be doing. The adults around me supported me in the same way when adults were kind of struggling of like, what events should we do? How can we get people engaged? The youth supported them. And it was this mutual relationship that it's like we keep each other going. So I think that's the best part about youth and engagement is that adults have this like army behind them of youth, and we have all these adults helping us along the way whenever someone needs. So I think adults definitely gain that motivation to because they know how many people they're impacting and vice versa.
For sure. Oh, go ahead, Milton. Are you gonna?
Oh, no, you can go.
Okay. I agree with Yashi, and I also think it. Oh, I lost my train of thought. 1 second. Oh, also that young people have, they bring into the adult world like a collaborative effort where they can kind of walk side by side and do their work together. You kind of think about like, you know, if you're working on an election, you need the campaign manager, but you also need someone who knows a lot about policy. You can't get things done with just a campaign manager. You can't get things done with just a policy person. So the adults need the young people need the adults to kind of walk hand in hand together and get things done. And the adults gain a lot from, you know, just the young presence, but also like the interesting things that young people have to say and the train of thoughts that adults don't always have, and the perspectives that they don't always have, because, you know, adults aren't in schools every day, or if they are, they're not in those internal conversations. And so those are the things that adults can gain, as well as just becoming better people because they are able to engage other communities.
That's great.
Yeah, just to quickly add on, I know that adults in tobacco control provide a lot of support for youth, but I think youth also, in a sense, provide a lot of support for the adults working in different coalitions and different organizations, because I think it really provides a sense of comfort and a sense of structure and support for the adults to know that they're passing on the baton and passing on the torch to a new generation that's equally as passionate towards fighting for tobacco control advocacy as they are.
That's great. So as we're kind of wrapping up the panel, I would love to turn it over to our audience. Do you have any specific questions for either of our three advocates? You can type it into the chat, or you can unmute if you like. First question: when using your personal social media for tobacco prevention, do you prefer to produce your own posts or share others' accounts, videos, stories, or do you prefer to engage with others one-on-one through direct messages?
Okay, so I personally like to repost everything that like CTFK posts or my hometown campaigns, what they post. By producing my own posts, I don't really do that, but if I see no smoking signs in my community, I definitely take a picture and post it on my Instagram story because I feel like that's such a great thing. I saw one in like a beach nearby that said no e-cigarettes, and I was so happy. So I took a picture of it and posted it. I think also a big thing that I love to do is I love to send DMs to the different Incorruptibles organizations in the state. I just tell them like, great job, I love what you're posting, just to, you know, give everyone a boost. So I just do that.
Anna Grace or Milton, do you have anything else to add to that question, or should I move on to the next?
I'd say I usually just do a genuine post, but I'm a hardcore Twitter user, so that's probably why I like just tweeting out a few words. And then I can answer the next question when we get there.
Yeah, I think for me, I just generally repost posts from other organizations, and I know too a lot of youth groups working in tobacco control, they have their own social media, and I think it's a really great opportunity for the youth working in tobacco control to make their own posts there, and also just to kind of create a sense of community.
Nice. So the next question, are you challenged by some youth who, if you've never used tobacco? So basically have you been challenged by folks questioning your work on this issue if you haven't been a tobacco user?
My quick answer to that would be yes, absolutely. Like, even I'm from a family of 10 and 6 of my siblings use tobacco, and they always come after me and challenge me, as do people I've worked with in the community. As just kind of going back to the social media thing, is even though I work doing tobacco prevention, like socially, I've separated myself from that on social media, because a lot of users will come after you and you're like, I'm just trying to have a fun time. Thank you. So yes, youth and other people have definitely come after me and challenged me and been like, you're not right, you don't understand. And when that happens, it's like, okay, I want to listen to you and I want to understand where you're coming from and how we can work together and kind of address this, instead of being like, you're wrong, I'm right, or them saying that I'm wrong and they're right. So kind of like finding the middle ground and listening and understanding.
So another question, which social media platforms do you use? We've referenced Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, any others?
I personally just use my Instagram stories. I haven't figured out a way to make anti-vaping, anti-smoking TikToks very engaging right now. So that's in the works, but I mostly use Instagram stories because it's easier to repost other campaigns like social media assets and stuff like that. I think another way to engage is probably like in the comments of these campaigns and just telling them that they're doing a great job, or like, just supporting each other. So that's what I do usually.
Nice. So as we are getting ready to close out this session, I know there was one other comment that was posted in for a group who's looking to engage, thank you, Yashi, in podcast with their students. So that's great. But in closing, for each of the panelists, could you quickly just provide a tip or a piece of advice that you would give our audience today to kind of anchor back in the importance of successful youth engagement?
I think my tip would be, if you want to get involved, then look into any clubs, like especially if you're in high school and middle school, look at any mental health or public health clubs and talk to the advisors. My advisor was my school nurse, and she told me about these campaigns, and she's the reason I got involved. So make sure to talk to your adults, because they usually have connections with statewide campaigns going on, especially health campaigns that you can get involved with. So I would just say, just keep an eye out and don't be afraid to talk to adults. They will support you a lot.
Yeah, I think my one tip to leave the panel with, I think really is just when working with youth, being willing to listen and being willing to help support them. I think that's something that's really important. And I think just giving them a platform to speak and giving them a platform to help educate others on the many different connections with other issues that tobacco use has. I think that's something that's really important. And I think it really helps kind of develop that sense of community that really feels tobacco control advocacy, and that really improves its longevity and really pushes it towards the future.
For sure. And I just say, meet people where they're at, like meet young people where they're at, listen to them, definitely just listen to them. And then also be there for them, because like they're going to want to get engaged in the work you're there for them. Like my mentors I worked with helped me write my college essays. They helped me do all these things, and they were there for me. And then I was like, I'll be there for you too. So kind of meet them where they're at. And also the same with young people, meeting adults where they're at and figuring out how you can find a balance. That's what I'm gonna leave y'all with.
Great. Anna Grace, Yashi, Milton, thank you all so much for your time today. We really appreciated all of the knowledge that you've shared. So again, thank you, and thanks for having us today.
Yes, thank you so much, Gustavo, youth ambassadors, and everyone for joining us today. Just want to let you know that presentation materials from the keynotes and these workshops will be available on our website. Also, we're going to be putting that the link to the evaluation survey is on the housekeeping sheet in the attendee folder. We're also going to be adding that to the chat right now. Again, we really appreciate your feedback as it will be used to help us plan for future conferences. Please complete the evaluation survey by tomorrow, January 28th, to receive a certificate of participation. Certificates will be sent to the email you provided during registration in a few weeks. So we appreciate your patience during that time. And again, if you have any questions, you could always email us at info@marylandtcrc.org. Even if they are questions to reach out to the ambassadors, we can always help forward those and manage them off to everyone that was here. And just wanted to say thank you again for joining.